My sister was hooked up to a heart monitor at 2 a.m. And it was my fault. Not my parents' fault. Not the decade of lies they built their entire life on top of. Not the decision they made when I was 14 years old that split my life into two halves, the before and the after, and changed everything about who I was going to become. Mine. Here is what makes this story different from every revenge story you have ever heard. I did not fail. I did not get caught. I did not make a single mistake. The plan worked. Every single piece of it, down to the last detail, after 10 years of waiting and building and staying completely silent. My parents lost everything. Their reputation, their business, their friendships, their comfortable life in their nice house on their nice street. All of it, gone. Exactly the way I wanted. And I was sitting on a hospital floor at 2 in the morning, back against a cold white wall, listening to machines beep behind a closed door, knowing that the only person who had ever loved me without conditions was in that room. Because of what I did. Not what they did. What I did. My name is Emily. I am 28 years old. And this is the true story of how I became the most dangerous thing a person can ever become. Someone who is completely justified, completely prepared, and completely wrong about what they are actually doing. Stay with me. This story goes places I did not see coming. And I built the whole thing. Before anything else, you need to understand the town I grew up in. Because the setting is almost a character in this story. Small town. The kind where everyone knew your name, your business, your parents' business, and the rumor about your cousin that happened 6 years ago and still gets mentioned at Christmas. The kind of town where reputation was not just important, it was currency. The thing you spent and saved and protected more carefully than money, because money you could eventually recover. Reputation, once gone, stayed gone. My parents understood this better than anyone. My father Richard was tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who filled a room by existing in it. He had a deep laugh he deployed with. He remembered the names of people's children, their dogs, their elderly parents. He gave firm handshakes and held eye contact in a way that made people feel, without knowing why, that here was a man you could trust with anything. He was very good at the eye contact especially. My mother Carol was quieter but no less deliberate in her warmth. She organized school fundraisers with cheerful efficiency that made other mothers feel both helped and slightly outclassed. She brought meals to sick neighbors before anyone had thought to organize a rota. She sent handwritten birthday cards to people who barely knew her name. She had a way of listening, leaning in slightly, eyes focused, that made you feel like whatever you were saying was the most important thing she had heard all week. They were, by every external measure, perfect. And I, from as young as I can remember, was the one who saw the gap. The tiny distance between who they were in public and who they were when the door closed and the performance could briefly, finally rest. I could not have named it at 5. I could not have articulated it at 8. But I felt it the way you feel a draft before you find where it is coming from. Something beneath the surface of our perfect family in our perfect house on our perfect street did not quite add up. My sister Grace never felt it. Grace was 3 years younger than me, which meant she was my entire world from the moment she arrived in it, this small serious dark-eyed creature who looked up at me from her blanket when she was 3 days old and decided, immediately and permanently, that I was safe. Grace was the most trusting person I have ever known. Not naive. I want to be precise about that because Grace was never stupid, but genuinely, constitutionally inclined toward believing the best about people. She extended the benefit of the doubt the way other people breathe. Automatically, without thinking of it as a choice. She looked at our parents and saw the good parts. I looked at our parents and kept a running count of everything that did not add up. That difference, that single difference in how we saw the same two people, is the reason everything that happened over the next 15 years happened to me and not to her. And it is the reason that when the whole thing finally detonated, she was the one who got hurt the most. Remember that. It matters more than anything else I am going to tell you. The Sunday they called me into the living room, Grace was at a friend's house. I have thought about that detail many times since. Whether it was deliberate, Whether they waited until she was gone specifically to have this conversation. I believe they did, but I have no proof and it does not matter, because what happened next was calculated regardless. They sat across from me on the sofa, side by side, presenting a unified front. My father did the talking. My mother looked at a point 6 inches to the left of my face. There was an opportunity, my father said. His sister Patricia lived 4 hours away, excellent schools, more opportunities. Patricia and her husband Gerald had a big house, no children, lots of space. They had generously offered to have me come and stay. Just for a while. It would be wonderful for my future. I looked at him for a long moment. I asked when I was coming back. He said soon, just until things settled down. I asked why Grace was not going too. Pause. My mother's eyes dropped to the carpet. My father said I was more mature, that I could handle it, that it made more sense for me to go. I was 14 years old. And in that pause, in the half second between my question and his answer, in the moment my mother looked at the carpet, I understood with complete clarity what was actually happening. They were sending me away because they needed to. Because I cost money they did not have. Because Grace was younger and easier and she was his favorite. I had always known it, the way you know things in your body before your mind confirms them, and they were simply, practically, without drama, not willing to send her. I was the one they could live without. I did not argue. I went upstairs and packed a bag in silence, and I think that silence frightened my mother more than anything I could have screamed. She came to my door twice that evening. I told her I was fine both times. I was not fine, but I had already decided that fine was the only thing I was going to show them ever again. The morning I left, Grace stood at the front door in her pajamas. She did not fully understand what was happening. She thought it was a long visit. She made me promise to text her every day, her eyes red, her nose running, 11 years old and trying so hard to be brave about something she did not understand. I hugged her for a long time. I memorized the way she smelled. Shampoo and something sweet, something that was just specifically Grace. I got in my aunt's car. I did not look back at my parents. I looked at Grace until she disappeared. Here is the part most people skip over. The middle years. The years that were not a single dramatic event but the slow, grinding, daily construction of the person I eventually became. Most revenge stories jump from the wound to the revenge. Years get summarized in a sentence. I am not doing that. Because these years are where everything actually happened. Aunt Patricia was not a bad woman. I want to say that clearly because it is true and the truth matters even when it is complicated. She was a woman who had agreed to take in her brother's teenage daughter as a favor, I would later discover, that her brother had compensated her for financially, and who was completely unprepared for what a grieving, furious, silent 14-year-old actually looked like up close. She had imagined a sad child she could comfort, a project she could pour warmth into and watch improve. She had not imagined Emily. She had not imagined a girl who answered every question politely and completely and gave away absolutely nothing. Who cried, if she cried at all, only in the shower with the water running loud. Who got up every morning and went to school and came home and did her homework and went to bed and started again with the mechanical reliability of something that had decided survival was a discipline rather than a feeling. Patricia tried. She bought me things, books she thought I might like, clothes she thought were fashionable. She knocked on my bedroom door on weekend evenings and suggested films, meals out, walks. Her husband Gerald was a quiet man who worked long hours and treated me with a careful, considerate distance that was, in its own way, the kindest thing anyone in that house did for me. He did not push. He did not probe. He simply left the space beside him at the breakfast table available and did not comment when I occasionally, cautiously, sat in it. But Patricia and I never found our way to each other. She did not know how to reach me and I did not know how to let her, and after 8 months she stopped trying and we settled into a cordial, functional distance that we maintained for the rest of my time there. School was different. I was placed in a year group slightly ahead of where I would have been at my old school. An administrative decision that turned out to be accidental salvation. Having to work harder than everyone else gave me somewhere to put the energy that might otherwise have eaten me alive. By 15 I was top of my year in English, history and biology. By 16 I was top in everything. Patricia mentioned it at dinner parties with something that sounded almost like pride. I did not begrudge her that. She had found in my grades a way to feel good about an arrangement that had not gone the way she hoped. It cost me nothing. But here is what was happening underneath the good grades and the quiet dinners and the cordial distance. Every Sunday I called home. Grace always answered first, clearly waiting by the phone. She would talk for 30-40 minutes, filling me in on everything, making everything she described feel vivid and immediate, and she had this quality of making me laugh even on the Sundays I had decided in advance not to feel anything. The laughing hurt. I loved her so much it was almost unbearable. My parents took the phone briefly after Grace. Said things were getting better. Said soon. They always said soon. I stopped believing soon somewhere around my 15th birthday. And the day I stopped believing it was the day something else began. I did not call it planning then. I called it thinking. But looking back, the plan had already started. I just had not admitted it to myself yet. 3 months into my time at Patricia's house, something happened that I have never told anyone until right now. Patricia asked me to move a box of old paperwork from one room to another. Routine. Domestic. The kind of task you hand to the person living in your house because they are there and capable. The box was full of old bills and receipts. And at the bottom, folded into thirds, tucked beneath a stack of utility bills, was a letter. From my father. To Patricia, dated 6 weeks before I arrived. I stood in the middle of that room for a very long time after I read it. The letter was careful, formal in the way my father wrote when he was being precise about something he did not want misunderstood. It laid out the arrangement in clear terms. Patricia and Gerald would house me, covering what my father called one significant ongoing household expense. In return he would repay them a specific sum with interest once his finances stabilized, plus a percentage stake in his business going forward. He called me the interim arrangement. I was 14 years old. I was an interim arrangement. I folded the letter back into thirds. Put it back exactly where I found it. Moved the box to the room Patricia wanted. Went upstairs. Sat on my bed. Stared at the wall for 2 hours. Then I got out my school notebook and wrote down every detail I could remember. Every number, every date, every phrase, the exact wording. I put the notebook in the bottom of my school bag. Went downstairs for dinner. Said please and thank you and helped clear the plates. And something inside me that had still, despite everything, been hoping my parents were frightened and desperate but ultimately good, that thing quietly, finally, permanently closed. The other thing I need to tell you about the Patricia years, the only genuinely good thing that happened to me there, was Daniel. Daniel sat 2 rows behind me in history. He had a habit of asking questions the teacher could not answer, not to be difficult, just because he was genuinely, insatiably curious about everything and had not yet learned that this was not always appreciated. He noticed me about 3 weeks into term. Not romantically, not at first. He noticed me the way very perceptive people sometimes notice very closed-off people, with patient, undemanding curiosity. Like someone who has found an interesting locked door and is content to sit near it without trying to force it open. He started sitting next to me at lunch. Not every day, not in a way that felt like pressure. Just sometimes, with his food and his book and his slightly chaotic energy, talking about whatever he was currently obsessed with. Local history 1 week, deep-sea biology the next, the economics of medieval grain markets the week after, and he did not seem to require anything from me except that I exist in the same space. I think Daniel saved my life. Not dramatically, not in a single moment. In the accumulation of those lunches over months and then years, the slow patient building of a friendship that asked nothing except that I show up and breathe and occasionally tell him he was wrong about something and watch him light up because someone was engaging with him properly. He was the first person I told about the letter. 2 years after I found it, on a rainy Wednesday afternoon in the school library when everyone else had gone home. I do not know why that day. I only know he was the only person I had ever met who listened without agenda, without the need to offer a solution or a comfort, just completely, entirely present. He read my notes. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What are you going to do with this?" I said, "I don't know yet. But I'm going to do something." He nodded, handed the notebook back, said, "Okay, tell me when you figure it out." He did not try to talk me out of it. He did not tell me to let it go or forgive them or think about what it would do to me. He just accepted it, that I was going to do something, that I had the right to do something, and moved on. That moment of being believed, of having my anger taken seriously without being asked to justify or moderate or diminish it, I did not realize until much later how much it had pushed me forward when maybe, just maybe, a different response might have made me think more carefully about what I was building. Daniel would become the thread running quietly through the next decade of this story. Not loudly, not dramatically, but consistently there, in the background, the way the most important things in your life often are, present without announcement, significant without ceremony. I left Patricia's house at 18 with a university acceptance letter, a school record that was by any measure extraordinary, and an anger that had been sitting in my chest for 4 years getting quieter and more organized with every passing month. The morning I left, Patricia stood at the front door and said she hoped things would go well for me. She meant it. I thanked her for having me. I meant that too, in the way you can mean something true without it being the whole truth. Gerald shook my hand and said I was going to be remarkable. He said it simply, with complete conviction. I believed him, just not in the way he intended. I chose law and I want to be honest about why. Not because I wanted to help people, though I told myself that for approximately the first semester before I stopped bothering with the comfortable story. Because I wanted to understand how people hide things. And how they get found out. And the exact difference between the person who gets away with it and the person who does not. From my first lecture I was the most focused student in every room. One professor, Dr. Hartley, small and precise, the kind of mind that located the flaw in an argument at 60 paces, told me at the end of my first year that she had taught for 22 years and had never seen a first year with my particular combination of analytical precision and what she called prosecutorial instinct. I asked what she meant. She said, "You don't just want to understand the law. You want to use it. There is a difference." She was not wrong. I studied financial crime, corporate fraud, whistleblowing law, investigative journalism law, the legal protections around anonymous source disclosure. I was building a weapon. Slowly, carefully, with the patience of someone who had learned patience the hard way and understood that a weapon built too quickly is a weapon that misfires. And then there was Grace. Grace visited every few months, arriving at my door with a rucksack full of snacks and the slightly chaotic energy of someone who had never learned to travel lightly. Those weekends were the only times in those years when the thing I was becoming got to put itself down for a moment and just be a person who loved her sister. Grace was studying to be a primary school teacher. She wanted to work with children from difficult home situations, kids who needed someone completely in their corner. She talked about it with a passion that was entirely, genuinely hers. No performance, no calculation, just Grace, wanting to make things better for people who had it hard. She was going to be extraordinary at it. She already was. She never criticized our parents when she visited. I never pushed her to. She loved them in her uncomplicated way and I loved her too much to take that from her. So we had an unspoken arrangement. When she visited, we did not talk about them. We talked about everything else in the world. It was enough, more than enough. It was the best thing in my life and I held on to it carefully. What Grace did not know was that at 22 I had hired a private investigator. His name was David, recommended by a solicitor I had worked with, a careful recommendation, given quietly over coffee, with the caveat that David was thorough, discreet, did not work cheaply, and did not cut corners in either direction. He was a small, neat man in his mid-50s who wore unremarkable clothes and had the kind of face people forgot 30 seconds after looking at it. 18 years in financial investigation with the Metropolitan Police before going private. He had seen most things and was unsurprised by most things and had a quality I found immediately reassuring. He did not ask why. He asked what, and then he went and found it. I gave him everything. Every fragment from the October night when I was 13. Every overheard conversation. Every name I had heard once and never again. And the letter, I had memorized it so completely I could reproduce it word for word. I did. He listened, made notes, said he would be in touch. 14 months later he put a file on the table between us in a quiet coffee shop. Put his hands flat on either side of it and looked at me and said, "It's thorough. Are you sure you want to read it today?" I said yes. The file confirmed everything I had suspected and added things I had not. My father's original financial crisis had stemmed from misappropriated funds in a business partnership, money quietly redirected, accounts structured to obscure the movement, a partner named Michael who had suspected for years but could never gather clean enough evidence to act. The arrangement with Patricia was documented, the financial trail, the payments, the correspondence, the business stake eventually transferred. My mother had not just known. She had been involved in structuring part of it. Her name was on documents carefully filed to be difficult to find. David had found them, and there was more. After their recovery, after I had been used as the mechanism of that recovery, my father had made the same kind of borderline decisions again. Smaller, tidier, but the same instinct, the same willingness to blur the line between what was his and what was not, applied to new people who did not yet know what Michael knew. I sat with the file for a long time. David drank his coffee and did not rush me. When I looked up he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to think about it." He nodded, said the file would wait. I took it home, locked it in a drawer, and sat with it for 2 full years. Not because I was uncertain. Because I had learned that the difference between a plan that works and a plan that fails is almost always patience. And I was not going to fail. During those 2 years I kept something else running quietly alongside the waiting. I was building a relationship with a journalist named Rachel. Rachel wrote about financial misconduct, corporate fraud, regulatory failures, the gap between what institutions claimed about themselves and what they actually did. She had broken 3 significant stories in 4 years, each one more carefully documented than the last, each one resulting in real consequences for people who had believed themselves untouchable. She was 34, sharp, and wrote with a clarity and precision that I recognized because I had trained myself to think the same way. I found her work first. Then I found her. Then over 18 months I made myself useful to her, not dishonestly, not manipulatively, but in the specific way that people with overlapping expertise become useful to each other. I sent her a careful email about a legal nuance she had missed in a published piece. She responded. We had a conversation. The conversation continued. Over 18 months we became, in the particular way of people in overlapping professional fields, colleagues and then something approaching friends. We met for coffee every few months. Talked about work and the state of things and trusted each other's judgment in the bounded way that professional respect allows. I never mentioned my parents during this period. Not once. I was building trust, not creating obligation. There is a difference. Obligation makes people feel used when they discover it. Trust makes them feel chosen. I knew exactly what I was doing. And I knew it was not uncomplicated. I chose to set that complication aside. That was my choice. I am not pretending otherwise. I also spent 6 months constructing the anonymous submission route for the financial authority complaint. Legal research, technical research, consultations with a privacy specialist. The route needed to be completely clean, untraceable not just in obvious ways but in the subtle ones. Metadata. Timing. The patterns sophisticated investigators look for when identifying a source. It was clean. I tested it 3 times with dummy submissions before I used it. By 26 I had everything. The file from David, the financial trail, the relationship with Rachel, built on genuine professional respect and 18 months of honest cultivation. The anonymous submission route, tested and clean. My legal career, established and solid. I sat one evening and looked at all of it spread across my kitchen table. I thought about my father's voice saying it makes more sense for me to go. I thought about my mother looking at the carpet. I thought about Grace at the front door in her pajamas, nose running, trying to be brave. I thought about the letter. The interim arrangement. I thought about sitting on my bed in Patricia's house staring at the wall while something inside me permanently closed. And I thought, now. Part 4. Execution. I gave Rachel the file on a Monday afternoon. Same coffee shop where David had given it to me. I had spent the previous week preparing a summary document, clearest possible sequence, strongest elements flagged, areas where further verification was needed with David's supporting material already attached. Rachel read the summary while I drank my coffee and watched her face. She read the way judges listen to arguments, with complete attention and complete neutrality, giving nothing away. When she finished, she looked up and said, "How long have you had this?" 2 years, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, your connection to the subject? I had prepared for this question. I told her the complete truth. All of it. The living room. The morning I left. The letter. David. The 2 years of sitting with it. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet. Then she said, "I need to verify everything independently. Everything David found, I reach it myself." I said I expected nothing less. She said it would take 3 months minimum. I said I had waited 12 years. 3 months was manageable. She almost smiled, closed the folder, put it in her bag, said she would be in touch. Walking out of that coffee shop, I felt something I can only describe as the lightness of a person who has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and has finally, after years of adjusting their posture around the weight, been able to put it down. I did not know yet that the weight was still there. I had just handed it to someone. 3 months and 11 days later, Rachel called. She had verified everything. In the course of her independent investigation, she had found 2 additional elements David had not surfaced: a second business partner from an earlier period with a story nearly identical to Michael's, and a paper trail connecting my mother to a specific financial decision that was, in Rachel's precise assessment, significantly more serious than anything in David's file. She asked if I wanted to see the piece before it published. I said yes. She sent it. I read it. It was clean, thorough, legally sound, devastating. Not a single sentence I could identify as unfair or unsupported. She had done what she always did, built something airtight. I told her it was ready. She published on a Thursday. The article went live Thursday morning. By Thursday evening it had been shared over 1,000 times. By Friday morning 2 larger national outlets had picked it up. By Friday afternoon Michael had issued a public statement confirming he had cooperated with Rachel's investigation and that the findings were consistent with his own experience. By Monday the financial authority had publicly confirmed an investigation. By Tuesday my father's position on the local business committee had been suspended pending review. By Wednesday my mother had quietly withdrawn from the community garden project, her resignation accepted without comment, the phone calls from friends having become first awkward, then infrequent, then completely silent. 10 days. Their world collapsed in 10 days. Completely. Efficiently. No possibility of the quiet internal management they had always been so expert at. This was documented, public, confirmed by a financial authority and by the man my father had wronged, who had spent years waiting for exactly this moment. There was no version of this they could recover from. Not the reputation, not the relationships, not the comfortable life on the street where everyone had thought they were wonderful. I had not just dismantled what they had. I had dismantled the version of themselves they had spent 30 years building. I sat in my flat on a Friday evening, 2 weeks after publication, watching the last of the visible fallout settle, and I told myself what I was feeling was peace. It was not peace. I know that now. It was just the absence of attention I had been carrying for 12 years. It felt similar, but it was not the same thing at all. And then my phone rang. 1:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because it has become one of those numbers that lives in my body rather than just my memory. 1:47. The specific minute my life divided again into a before and an after. The screen lit up in the dark of my bedroom. Grace. I sat up before I had consciously decided to. My body knew before my mind caught up. Grace did not call at 1:47 in the morning. Grace was the person who texted "is now an okay time" before calling at 3 in the afternoon. The person who left voicemails apologizing for calling in case you were busy. Who would rather wait an extra day than risk interrupting something? Grace did not call at 1:47 in the morning. I answered on the second ring. She was not crying. That was the first thing I noticed and the thing that frightened me most. Grace always cried when she was upset. She believed in it, said once that feelings needed somewhere to go and crying was the most efficient route. In 25 years of knowing her, I had never heard her voice emptied out the way it was emptied out in that moment. Flat, hollow, the voice of someone who had been crying for so long and so privately that they had used everything up and arrived somewhere beyond it. She was at the hospital, she said. Had been there for 3 hours already. Severe panic attack, the worst she had ever had. Her heart had gone into an abnormal rhythm. The paramedics had been called. They were monitoring her overnight. She was okay, she said. She said "I'm okay" in a voice that was the furthest thing from okay I had ever heard from anyone. She was 23 years old. I was in my car in 4 minutes. No bag, no plan, keys, phone, shoes, moving. 4 hours without stopping except once for petrol, hands on the wheel, motorway lights strobing past in the dark, and for most of that drive I could not feel anything at all. Not fear, not guilt, not urgency, just a terrible suspended blankness, like standing on the edge of something so high the mind simply refuses to process it. I found Grace in a hospital room at 6 in the morning. Pale against the white pillow in a way that made me think of paper, something that had had all the color carefully pressed out of it. A monitor beside the bed, its green line moving steadily. She was awake, had been awake for most of the night. She had not called anyone. Not our parents, not a friend, only me. She did not ask why I had come. She did not seem surprised. She just looked at me and then moved her hand across the blanket and I sat in the chair beside her bed and took it and we did not say anything for a long time. The ward was quiet in the particular way hospitals are quiet at 6 a.m., not silent but hushed, everything muffled, operating at a volume that felt like consideration for the people in the beds. I sat there and held her hand and looked at her face. And something happened inside me that I had not felt since I was 14 years old, since the morning I got in the car and looked at her until she disappeared. Something cracked, not the organized thing I had spent 12 years building. Something underneath it, something much older and much less armored. When she finally spoke, she spoke quietly, carefully, the way you speak when you have spent a long time deciding exactly what you are going to say and you want to get it right. She had known it was me, she said, almost immediately. She did not explain how, only that she knew me, the way people who love each other specifically and for a long time know each other. She had recognized it the way you recognize someone's handwriting without being able to explain how. She had not called when she found out. Had not said anything. Had tried to process it alone. For 3 weeks she had been holding everything together while she processed it alone. Our parents had fallen apart in ways she had not been prepared for. Not the public collapse, she had come to understand that once she recognized what I had done, but the private one. The phone calls, the tears, the relatives contacting her, asking what had happened, what did she know, why had no one said anything. The position she had been put in, standing in the middle of something enormous that she had not been consulted about, done around her and to her world without anyone asking whether she was okay with it. She had gone to work every day, stood in front of her class of 7-year-olds and taught them phonics and helped with their reading and wiped noses and mediated small disputes over pencil cases. And then gone home to her flat and sat alone with something too large and too complicated to carry. For 3 weeks. And then one evening it had simply become too much and her body made the decision her mind had been refusing to make. She was not angry, she said. Said it clearly, directly, with the specific emphasis of someone making sure you understand this is not a softening or a preamble but simply the truth. She was not angry. She understood why I had done it. What our parents had done to me was wrong. She had always known it was wrong, even when she was too young to name it, even when she could not do anything about it, even when loving them had made it impossible to say out loud. She paused. But she said. You didn't ask me. I did not say anything. It was my family too, she said. My life too. My relationships and my parents and whatever normal looked like for me. And you made a decision that changed all of it, that changed everything, without asking me. Without telling me. Without giving me the chance to be part of it or to prepare for it or to choose how I wanted to handle my own life when it happened. I found out the same way the people in our town found out. The same way Michael found out. The same way everyone found out. Her voice stayed quiet, stayed careful. I would have supported you, she said. If you'd told me, I would have been scared and I probably would have asked you to think about it longer. But I would have been with you. I would have known it was coming. I would have been prepared. I would have had the chance to decide what I wanted to do with my own relationships with them before everything collapsed. Instead, I just found out. And I've been alone with it ever since. I had no answer. There was no answer. I had spent 10 years building a case. 12 years carrying an injury. 28 years being the one who noticed things, cataloged things, planned things. And I had not once, not in 10 years, not in 12, properly thought about what it would mean for Grace. About the fact that she was standing close enough to the fire to get burned. About the fact that I was about to do to her the exact thing I had spent my whole life being defined by having done to me. Nobody consulted me. Nobody asked if I was okay with it. And I had done it to her. That is the thing about becoming what hurt you. You do not notice it happening. You think you are building justice. You think you are finally, after years of being the person things happen to, becoming the person who makes things happen. And you are. But you are also, without seeing it, making decisions that affect the people closest to you without asking if they are okay with it. You are becoming your parents. And you are too focused on what you are doing to notice. Grace was discharged 3 days later. Heart rhythm stabilized. Doctors said stress-induced, gave her advice about rest and support, sent her home. I stayed for a week. Slept on her sofa. Made food she did not always eat. I was there when she wanted to talk and silent when she did not. I did not try to justify or explain or apologize in ways that were really just explanations wearing apologies clothing. I just stayed. On the 4th day she asked me something I had not expected. She asked how I felt. Not about what had happened to her, about the whole thing. About what I had done. About whether it had given me what I thought it would. I told her the truth. That it had not felt the way I had imagined. That I had imagined something clean, a closing, a completion, a door finally shutting on something that had been open for 12 years letting cold air in. That what I had actually felt was something more like the absence of a pain I had been living with so long that I had built my entire identity around it. And that I did not know yet who I was without it. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, I think you've been angry for so long that the anger became the plan, and the plan became you, and now the plan is done and you don't know what you are without it. She paused. I think you need to talk to someone. Not me. Someone who is not inside this. Even then, even 4 days after a cardiac event that I had caused, pale and exhausted on her sofa, she was thinking about what I needed. Trying to figure out how to help me. I do not have the language for what it is to be loved like that. I started therapy 6 weeks later. Her name was Dr. Miriam Okafor. Recommended by a colleague with the kind of precision and lack of sentimentality I found reassuring. She was a small, composed woman in her early 50s with a complete absence of the need to fill silence. She could sit in silence for as long as it took for you to be ready without the discomfort most people feel and most people fill with something unnecessary. First session I told her the entire story. Start to finish. The living room. Patricia. The letter. David. 10 years of planning. Rachel. The article. 1:47 a.m. She listened without writing anything down. When I finished she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What did you think you would feel when it was done?" I told her. The closing. The completion. The door finally shutting. She nodded. "And what did you actually feel?" "Emptied," I said. Like something I had been carrying for so long it had become structural had been removed, and I did not know yet whether what was underneath was something solid or something that needed the weight to hold its shape. She looked at me. Then she said, "That is a very precise description of grief." I told her I was not grieving. She said, "What would you call it?" I did not have an answer then. I have been working on the answer for 2 years. I think what I am grieving is the version of my childhood I did not get to have. The version where my parents were who they appeared to be. I have known for 15 years that version did not exist. But some part of me kept the wound open, kept holding on to it, because the wound was the evidence that I had been wronged. And I was afraid that if it closed I would lose the right to be angry. And the anger was the only power I had ever had. My parents. I have to tell you about them because this story would be dishonest if I pretended they ceased to exist after the article published. My mother called 6 weeks after publication. It was not the first time she had tried. It was the first time I answered. The conversation lasted 40 minutes and was one of the most complicated experiences of my life. She apologized, genuinely, I think, in the way she was capable of. But the apology was wound through with so much justification and context that it was very difficult to find the clean center of it. They had been frightened, she said. They had not known what else to do. They had told themselves I was resilient, that I would be okay, that Patricia would take good care of me, that it was temporary. She had told herself it was temporary so many times she had almost made herself believe it. I listened. I told her I heard her and I needed time. I did not tell her how much. I am still not sure. My father has not called. I have not called him. There is a conversation waiting somewhere in the future that neither of us is yet ready to have. I do not know what it will look like. I hold that question carefully. Grace sees them occasionally. I do not ask about it. She does not tell me. That is our arrangement, not absence of honesty but presence of a boundary that protects us both. Daniel and I still talk. Less frequently than at school but with the same quality, patient, undemanding, willing to sit with the complicated version without needing it to be simpler. About a year ago I asked him whether he thought I had done the right thing. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I think you did the necessary thing. I'm not sure those are the same. I think about that constantly." He is right. What I did was necessary. Necessary for the truth to be known, for Michael to finally be believed, for my father's actions to have the consequences they deserved. I do not regret the outcome. I do not think the outcome was wrong. But the way I did it. The secrecy. The exclusion of Grace. The decision to protect my plan from the one person who might have slowed me down enough to bring her with me. That was not necessary. That was a choice. The wrong one. 2 years have passed since the hospital. Grace and I talk every day. Sometimes a long call. Sometimes just a voice note. Sometimes just a photograph of something one of us saw that we thought the other would like. But every day. We have not missed a single day in 2 years. She has her own class now, year 2, 26 7-year-olds who by all accounts adore her. She sends me pictures of their work. Last week she sent a photograph of a birthday card the class made her. Crooked letters, lopsided drawings, the word universe spelled 4 different ways across the card. She sent it with a voice note that was mostly her trying not to cry from happiness. She told me recently, on one of our late-night calls that started at 10 and somehow it was 1 in the morning and neither of us had noticed, that she forgives me. Said it plainly, without ceremony. Not because what I did was okay. But because she knows where it came from. And because she loves me. And because, she said this in the very specific Grace way I will remember for the rest of my life. Holding on to it was making her tired and she would rather use that energy on something better. I told her I did not deserve her. She said that was probably true, but she had decided to keep me anyway. I am still in therapy. Still working on something I could not have named 2 years ago and can name now with reasonable accuracy: the difference between justice and healing. They are not the same thing. Justice is external. It is about the world being set right, about consequences landing where they belong, about the record being corrected. Healing is internal. It is about what you do with the wound after the record has been corrected. I was very good at justice. I am learning, slowly, how to be good at healing. If you are carrying something like this, a wound, a plan, a quiet anger you have been building for years, I am not telling you your feelings are wrong. They are not. What was done to you matters. It happened. It was real. But before you light the match, look carefully at who is standing close to you. Tell them, ask them, bring them with you instead of building the fire around them without their knowledge. Because the people who love you most are often the ones standing closest. And they are there because they chose to be. Because they love you. That love deserves more than becoming the collateral damage in someone else's war. Even if that someone is you. Even if the war was justified. Even then. My name is Emily. I got my revenge. I am still working out what to do with what it cost me. Thank you for listening.